You're listening to Food Psych, a podcast about nutrition, eating disorders, and body image. I'm your host, Christy Harrison, and I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist and certified intuitive eating counselor, specializing in health at every size. Join me as I talk with interesting people from all walks of life about their relationships to food.
I remember I was teething, little gums bleeding, cried every evening, it was all about eating. When I became a teen, it was all about beef, and now I'm ready for the world. Try and sink my teeth in.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 67. My guest today is a really inspiring person. She's been at the forefront of the body positive movement for a long time. She's a fellow health at every size dietitian, and she is the owner of Green Mountain at Fox Run, which is a non-diet retreat, wellness retreat for women in Vermont. And her name is Marsha Hudnall. Some of you guys may know her if you're following this world of body positivity and health at every size. But if you don't know her already, you definitely should, and you will in just a moment. But before I share our conversation, just want to tell you about a couple of great resources for improving your relationship with food. So the first is my free quiz to assess your relationship with food. Some of you guys may have taken this already, but for those of you who haven't, definitely get in there. I'll send you your individualized results via email with more than a dozen tips to help you make peace with food wherever you fall on the spectrum. So it's a great way to get a sense of where you are now and areas that you might need to work on in your relationship with food. So you can take the quiz and get your results today at christyharrison.com/quiz. That's christyharrison.com/quiz. The second resource I want to mention is my intuitive eating online course. It's a 13-week program that I created to help you work through the principles of intuitive eating in depth and really demystify and troubleshoot the common areas where people tend to get stuck. I'll show you how to recognize the diet mentality, even in its subtlest forms, and how to start substituting healthy thoughts instead. I'll also share my secrets for making food and exercise choices from a place of self-care rather than a place of self-control. I'll teach you how to navigate emotional eating and how to stop alternating between restricting and overeating or binging. And there's so much more. So just listen to what some of the previous course participants have had to say. One participant shared, "I really thought that I had given up the diet mentality. Now I realize that although I consciously reject dieting, I still have plenty of work to do towards accepting myself as I am. This module really helped me to identify what I need to work on by bringing it to my full awareness." Another participant shared this beautiful revelation that she had in the course. She said, "My worth is not my weight or my looks, but my heart, mind, and soul. I need to trade in my self-judgment for self-love and compassion. It feels impossible some days, but I'm going to do my best. I deserve it." And then yet another participant said, "I felt free, sweet, sweet freedom," when doing one of the exercises in this course. I'd love to have you guys join and be able to experience the transformation for yourselves. So check it out at christyharrison.com/course. That's christyharrison.com/course to sign up today. And then finally, if you would like to support the podcast and want to help us reach more people who need to hear the body positive message, you can leave us a great review on iTunes. Just open up iTunes on your computer, type in Food Psych to the search bar, click the result that comes up under podcasts, and go to the ratings and reviews tab. And there you can leave a nice rating and review sharing what you love about the podcast. Thank you guys so much for all of your support and for listening. It really means the world to me to have such a great community of people hearing these messages, and I just love hearing from you. So if you'd like to share your experience with the podcast, I'd love to have you do it on iTunes, and you can also follow me on Twitter at Food Psych Pod and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Food Psych to share your thoughts there as well. So now, without any further ado, let's go talk to Marsha Hudnall. I spoke with her via Skype from her home in Vermont. So tell me about your relationship with food growing up.
Christy, I have a history that's probably repeated, a gazillion times over in this culture today. And it was that of being born a round kid in a family of very thin people. Yeah, I was basically Irish, and I took after my mother, who she was round, but very beautiful and curvy, and I was this kind of plain Irish-looking young girl who, everybody said, "Well, you'd be really pretty if you just lost weight," you know. So it sort of, I talk about it burning some neural pathways in my brain very early in life, about how I looked. And, I had a few issues along the way where, they'd bring home a box of donuts and I would be cautioned not to eat too many of them and those sorts of things. But it wasn't too bad until I became a teenager. And then it was really that the body image really blew up. And I was never particularly large. I was just rounder. And of course, I had this terrible body image. And so when I was a senior in high school, I started dieting. And I ended up with a full-blown eating disorder for most of my 20s. But I fortunately recovered from that, and I've been recovered for 36 or more years now. So
Yay.
I consider myself one of the fortunate ones.
Seriously. Yeah.
Yeah. The interesting thing, though, is that those, bad body messages don't disappear. You just have to learn how to manage them. At least that's my experience.
Yeah. And I think it's so interesting that, like, for most of your childhood, it didn't quite coalesce into an eating disorder. It was like later that maybe all those bad body messages kind of reached a point. Do you know, like, kind of what triggered the eating disorder? Was it a diet that's sort of...
Well, interestingly enough, my senior year in high school, I don't think I've ever had any tendencies towards anorexia nervosa, but I did go on a diet. My first diet was a day for several months, and I ended up losing quite a bit of weight. But then, it started the yo-yo pattern. Particularly when I got a job my first job was working in a donut shop.
Interesting.
Yeah. But those were the days of speed too. All the doctors were giving, all the medications that were basically speed to
like
kill appetite.
Or whatever.
Well, it was before the fen days. It was just pure speed is what it was, to kill the appetite. And so I sort of managed through the donut days fairly well with that. But, you just can't do that forever. And
it's not good for your body.
Definitely not. My poor body has been so abused in the name of its size, as a younger person anyway. But interestingly, my mother came home one day from work and said, "I heard about a new way to, diet. Just eat what you want and then throw it up."
Oh, God.
So I went into bulimia. Yeah. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a crazy way to hear about it too. Like,
I know.
That is
I
so
know.
sad.
It is extremely sad. And but it's really just reflective of the fact that, when I was going through this, eating disorders were relatively uncommon. I think they were just really starting, and there was no knowledge out there about this. There were no treatment centers that I was aware of. I didn't even know what was happening, beyond the fact that I was just trying to be thin, And of course it didn't work because I actually was probably the largest that I had ever been while I was doing that.
Yeah, bulimia sort of doesn't lead to thinness.
Right.
In general. I mean, nothing does long term. I think that's also...
Exactly.
But, yeah. So that's really interesting then that, like, there was no official treatment for it at the time, because that is a really recent thing, like probably last 20 years or so.
I would think so. Now you just got, thank goodness, treatments popping up everywhere, but.
Right. And now too, anyone who kind of starts doing that behavior is recognized immediately, or probably knows themselves that that's what they're doing.
Right. It's just, it's truly, I'm trying to think of a good adjective to describe how I feel about the growth and understanding and just the support, I think, that you see among professionals on the internet. Of course, there's negative sides too, but there really is a growing wave of understanding and support for people who are struggling around these issues, and it's tremendous.
Yeah, there's so much more information out there now. But so when you were struggling with this stuff, like what do you think helped you come out of it? Or, what do you think maybe wasn't the most effective way to come out of it too? I'm sure you had some ups and downs.
Yeah, but really, I'm this is a characteristic of many people with eating disorders, perfectionistic type of person. And when I do things, I really do them. And a large part of my struggle, I do know, was starving. That I was not eating. So then I would end up binge eating in response, and then I would, want to get rid of it. So what really turned my life around for me was I was living out in LA, and I had just gotten my credentials as a registered dietitian, and I was working, but I was kind of looking for something that fit my interests more than what I was doing. And I ended up meeting a man from France who had written a diet book in France. Oh, and it was interesting, though, because it was a very reasonable one, but it was sort of like the forerunner of the Weight Watchers point system. But the real intention of it was to try to help people eat balanced and then to teach them how to eat foods that they fear. And so I worked with him to try to bring that book into, the U.S., but I also ended up having a romantic relationship with him. And he ended up really teaching me how to eat again, because he came from that French, wonderful food, but quality food and eating well. And then I also had the support, his support. So I think it was that combination of learning how to eat, but then getting my emotional life in order.
Right. Oh, that's so powerful too, to have someone, do for you what like families or treatment centers are often doing for people now. Like, kind of reteach you how to eat and support you, because I'm sure you also didn't want to like look crazy around him. Like you didn't want to let him know some of the behaviors you had done, right? So, or, at first.
Yeah, I can't remember. I'm not sure that I ever told him I was blaming. But I never thought of it the way that you just described it. I had my own little personal treatment center, but it was really made a difference for me. So
I really identify
forever on that one.
But yeah, I really identify with that one actually, because as I've shared with listeners here, like that was the first step for me out of the eating disorder, was dating a guy who was a foodie and a food writer, who I really didn't want to know like how crazy I was around food. I wanted to seem like this cool foodie girlfriend, like up for anything. So I didn't tell him, like we were together for 2 years and I didn't tell him that whole time, like what was really going on. But he helped me immensely. And I'm always grateful, because I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't stumbled into that relationship.
Same here. Yeah.
And so it's so interesting, like that you got your degree and became a registered dietitian right before any of this happened. Were you sort of drawn to the dietetics profession because of your own weight loss aspirations, or?
Absolutely. I'm not sure I would have ever gone in that direction. My original, and it's come back to me lately because I've been on some trips that I've been around the sea. My original desire was to be a marine biologist.
Oh, wow. Oh
but then when the eating disorder caught me up, and I always credit Adele Davis. This is probably way too early for you, but she was one of the first health food kind of extremist, but she had written a very popular book, and I read that, and it got me going down the nutrition end of things. Of course, extreme nutrition, but it was still better than what I was doing. But I needed to go back to school. I had quit after a couple of years of college, and I discovered relatively quickly that I was not going to be happy if I didn't have, more of a career. So I just thought, let's go into nutrition. Maybe I can. And it really was a matter of trying to heal myself, because obviously I knew things were not the way they needed to be for me.
Right. Yeah, I so identify with that too. And I think a lot of dietitians I've had on the podcast, it's like a very similar thing where you get attracted to that profession because you want to heal yourself in some way.
Yeah, and I was just having a conversation this morning with one of our dietitians at work, and we were just kind of decrying the fact that intuitive eating, mindful eating, counseling, all this stuff is not taught more in the diet, curriculum. Because this is really a problem, I think, for a lot of people in our profession. And certainly it is a problem for the people who are coming to us.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I forget what the statistics are on this, but there's a very high percentage of dietitians have eating disordered behaviors, could be diagnosed with an eating disorder.
Yeah.
And
if they don't have that, they've got disordered eating. It is a continuum. So, of course, there's just about hardly anyone in this society anymore that doesn't have some degree of disordered eating, unfortunately.
I know. I think it's like 75% of women or something. And I don't know the statistics on men, but it's growing, obviously. Yeah, it's crazy these days. And it's interesting too, like with, becoming a dietitian, I think it's really luck of the draw, like who gets out of that, disordered mentality and who stays stuck in it. And then, the people who stay stuck in it are still spreading these unhealthy messages about food. And, I think we both saw this like article that was just shared in the Health at Every Size Professionals Facebook group that was written by a registered dietitian who was saying like crazy stuff about how everybody should have orthorexia to some degree. And I'm just like, how can, is there a way to revoke someone's credentials? Because I think saying something like that is just beyond the pale.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting that, you had this winding path that ultimately led you out. So how did you get from the extreme form of nutrition? Was that before the relationship? And then the relationship kind of brought you out of that?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And then where did your career take you from there?
Well, I was working in hospital, and I decided that just really didn't fulfill me. So I was out in California, and had gone to a California Dietetic Association meeting and heard a professor from Boston University speak about their nutrition communications program. And it was a master's program. And I thought, because I love to write. And so I was getting ready to go to medical school. Wow. And I looked at this and I said, okay, I can go through this for a year, or I can go to medical school and all the other stuff that's associated with it for 10 years. I think I'll try this first.
Yeah.
And ended up just being a perfect fit for me because of my writing. I love to write. And anyway, so I went through that program. Then I ended up in New York working in public relations. And I got Green Mountain at Fox Run as a client.
Oh, wow.
And I like to tell the story that if people don't know what Green Mountain Fox Run is, it's a retreat for women who we really try to help them stop dieting and learn how to take care of themselves. And we deal with all the issues of primarily overeating is what most of the women who are struggling with who come to us. And we work in binge eating too. But anyway, I like to tell the story that I went up to Green Mountain to see more what it was about so I could better promote it. And I found myself very attracted to the principles because of what, I'd been through personally. And so I knew what I was looking at when I saw the program, experienced the program. But I also became very attracted to the son of the director, and we got married, and here I am 35 years later. But it's not just being there because it's a family, thing. It's really because it's really my passion to be working in this area. I'm very fortunate to be able to do that.
Right, totally. And your personal experience definitely made you probably more aware and able to relate to people around these issues.
Absolutely. It's an odd gift, but it is, if you look at it that way.
Oh, yeah. I think about that all the time. Like, I don't know what, if I would have even gone into dietetics if I hadn't had my own struggles, but then certainly wouldn't be able to relate to people and help people with their struggles in this way if I hadn't had that experience. So yeah, that's really fascinating. And did you like, that's so interesting that Green Mountain was already doing that, sort of anti-diet stuff like early on. How did they get sort of inculcated in that?
Well, my mother-in-law was, boy, you talk about a pioneer in the field. Back in the 1950s, she was a registered dietitian also, and she had worked in diabetes camps for kids, and she saw the effect that restriction had on their ability to really make choices in their own best interest. So when she saw the whole dieting phenomenon starting to take over in the 60s in the US, she said, I'm going to found a place where I can teach women how to eat instead of starve. And she targeted women because it was sort of that trickle down theory. If you teach the woman, you'll teach the rest of the family, And so, she wanted to teach them how to eat. She was one of the first really to start talking about the role of movement, of physical activity, but again, never extreme. She just had people walking and trying to enjoy, playing tennis and riding bikes and different things like that. And she was very aware of the role that stress played in all of this too. So she had sort of a 3-pronged program there that was about moving away from dieting, learning to enjoy physical activity, and learning how to manage the stress in your lives, knowing that, it really leads to emotional overeating for many people. So she put the program together, and I would say today it is very true to those roots. It's very much a health at every size model, but it is one that predated health at every size.
Right. I love that. That is so awesome. It's so fun to hear about the, pioneering people that came up with these ideas or sort of, saw this need independently and like the start of this movement. Because it now feels like it's really growing, and it's like I'm hoping starting to reach a critical mass because I see so much on social media probably, but it's interesting that before the internet, even people in their own little corners of the world were doing this.
Yeah, and I'm so agree with you on that, because 30 years ago, it felt like, we were this lone voice in the wilderness. There are a few other people that were talking this message, but there weren't many. Yeah. And it was a hard sell for many women, to really put their trust in this approach. It still is, to an extent, but it's certainly not as hard as it used to be to convince them to just try this approach. They come to us now fairly ready to jump in.
Yeah, maybe they've seen more, heard more about the anti-diet philosophy.
Right.
Understand that there's an alternative.
Right.
Yeah, that's so interesting though, when you were first starting out and doing it like without the mantle of health at every size, how did you kind of like stumble into that or formulate that approach? Because I think it's easy to go, you can certainly like go the direction that I see, unfortunately, so many people go with intuitive eating and anti-dieting, which is like, oh, do this and P.S. you'll lose weight after you can like get your emotions under control or whatever. It sounds like you never had that, that sort of twist to it.
Well, I don't think we ever promised it. I think we did acknowledge, and we still acknowledge, that some people do lose weight with this. Other people don't. Some people gain weight, So it's really what's right for your body. And what determines that is health, and that's really always been our focus. It's been about putting in place the attitudes and the behaviors that are going to support well-being. And then your body is going to search for homeostasis, for the right place for it, and it'll settle there, and you can have a wonderful life. Of course, if everything else falls into place too, but at least it'll be free of those struggles around eating and weight.
I mean, when you said that brings up for me too, like the importance of body image work and, body acceptance. So did you end up kind of developing programs in that early on, or?
It's really critical that you do body acceptance work at the same time, because I imagine, you've heard this from lots of people. It really doesn't matter where your body ends up. If you've got these bad body image thoughts going on in your head, they're still going to be there and they're still going to plague you.
Totally. Yeah. And they're still going to get in the way of authentic health.
Right.
Yeah. So figuring out how to help people and support people in that, which is tough in a diet culture and a body negative culture. I think it's like, pushing against this large tide.
It is. But I mean, our approach for that is really try to take care of yourself. And the best way that we've come up to help people do that is to just be aware of how you talk to yourself around that. And I sound like that Bob Newhart skit and then stop it. Just stop it,
Right.
But we try to give people, strategies for stopping it, not just stopping it, but which the primary one is really adopting this attitude of body neutrality, because so many women come to us, body positivity just seems way too far of a reach for them.
Yeah.
So we just say, if you can get to that middle place where at least you're not being negative about yourself, that's a tremendous step forward. And you may not go any further than that, but you can live well with that. Or you may go on to body positivity.
Yeah. That's a really helpful way to frame it, I think. Get a lot of people who are afraid of body positivity, who think that that's never going to happen for them. And
right.
I can see from a place of body hate why that feels way too far,
Right.
I remember when I was recovering from my own eating disorder, I definitely heard people talk about body acceptance, body positivity. And it was that is never going to happen for me. I'm never going to give up this fight to change my body, because it feels like a moral imperative, I think, at some level. And especially, to fit more into a societal ideal. I can see how a lot of things in people's lives push them towards that.
It certainly, I just think it's a plague, I think the body neutrality idea is really a tremendous one. Another really good strategy that I think works for a lot of us is the thought stopping strategy.
Yeah. So how would you put that into practice?
Well, basically, when these thoughts come into your head, to just one of our therapists at Green Mountain used to do it very dramatic. She was a drama, student originally before she went into psychology, but she would just you just yell out in your head, "Stop it." And then say, "This is not going to do me any good right now, thinking like this." And then take yourself to a good place, that you may have thought of, your special place, your calming place that you've thought of ahead of time. And it's just a real quick little strategy that people can revert to really easily. Stop it. This isn't going to help me right now. And then go to a good place in your head. And, those kind of little strategies can be really powerful because, again, it's about stopping the negative stuff. And that's really so destructive.
It is. That's a great tip because I think it's tough to actually put it into practice sometimes. That shift from body negativity to body neutrality is requires really changing all those little thoughts along the way. Every time a thought comes up, to do something with it and do something different. And you're really sort of carving different neural pathways, right?
Exactly. That's what it's all about.
Retraining the brain. Yeah. And do you end up also doing stuff where you substitute other thoughts, more positive thoughts, or?
That's part of that body neutrality process that we came up with. It's about coming up with some of these messages ahead of time that you can resort to because, in the heat of the moment, sometimes you can't think.
Right.
So you have these prepared messages and you repeat them often enough, you start digging new neural pathways. And, then I always talk about whether it's in body image or whether it's intuitive or mindful eating or physical activity or whatever, is that when you're first trying to change how you are in those areas, it takes time, it takes attention. Yeah. But the difference from something like dieting, which, takes a ton of time and attention too, or body hate, is that over time it becomes your way of being. And it can be your way of being with dieting too, but it's a very pleasant journey.
Yeah.
It's one that's just so much more pleasant. It's the best word, to come up with. So it's really much easier to do in the long run. And you don't need all that time and attention after a while, because again, you've laid down those neural pathways, and so that's where your mind starts to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I've totally experienced that in my own life. Like once I started to practice body neutrality really, and move towards positivity, it was like easier and easier to feel calm around that issue, like around body image, and to feel okay about myself. And then that started spreading out into all areas of life too. And I think that's such a huge key to like sustaining this, is that it does start to like touch how you relate to everything.
Right.
And now it's automatic. It's not like I have to be like, nope, stop the thought, substitute another thought. It just happens without my knowing.
Right. Yeah.
So you don't
Wonderful.
have to keep practicing, the actual motions forever. It's kind of like learning a skill, like a muscle memory sort of thing. The first time you do like the pat your head and rub your tummy thing, like, what the hell? And then it starts to actually come back every time.
Right. No, absolutely. That's a good comparison there.
Yeah. And I think people sometimes get stuck in that place where it's like, it's just hard and they don't think it's going to get easier. I just had a client say to me yesterday, like every time I get to the place where, because she has an eating disorder and she needs to restore weight. She's like, every time I get to the place where I can stay and, everybody tells me that my weight is restored, I can stay there for a little while and tolerate it for a little while. And then, something knocks me off course because it just is so hard and everybody promises that it's going to get easier. And I've never seen that, and it's so hard to like convey what it's like on the other side or what it takes for it to click, because it doesn't just click overnight or in a particular moment. But I think, you really can sort of trust that there is a huge difference waiting on the other side if you can get through that discomfort.
Absolutely. And also understanding that the path forward is not a straight path. It's for anything, it's right. 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 3 steps forward, 5 steps back, Right. But eventually, again, it's about those neural pathways. The more you do it, you start slowly making things change. And it's just about hanging in there, persistence.
Yeah.
Which is not always easy. Yeah.
No, it's really not. That's so powerful coming from someone who's like 30 plus years recovered too, because, it's like you can get there and have the 2 steps forward, 1 step back thing, and then just go from there. Like it's eventually it becomes easier. It becomes smooth sailing.
Yeah. I mean, and I would not being truthful if I didn't say that it's always smooth sailing. I do think, recovery, my definition of recovery is that you're a product of your experience. And so you're still going to look at food and your body and things that maybe in a different way than someone who's never had that experience that you had would, but it doesn't have to control your life. It doesn't have to have a negative impact on it. So when I have a day of eating horribly, which, some days I do, but it's not eating disorder. It's not eating disorder. It's just, life and, the foods that come your way sometimes, and, you feel horrible, as a result of eating like you did. I look at that with my experience, back there in the back of my head. But what I also do is go, well, it's not an eating disorder. That's just normal eating.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, that's a great way to frame it, because it is like that Ellen Satter quote that I love, where it's like, normal eating lists all these different things, all these different ways of relating to food that are, from like grazing throughout the day to eating, 3 meals to eating more than you want or more than you're hungry for because it tastes so good, and
right.
all these different things that are really normal. And I think sometimes when people have gone through an eating disorder and get to a place of early recovery, it's really scary for them to have those thoughts pop up, or an eating day like that where it's like, oh my God, am I being disordered? Like, what's happening?
Yeah.
So kind of normalizing that is helpful.
Yeah, I think it's important to know that there's no such thing as perfect here.
Right. With any area of life.
Yeah.
No, totally. Yeah, I guess I'm, shouldn't say smooth sailing at all because nothing ever is, but it's like, but it feels more automatic, I guess. Like it's more automated or something than when you're first starting to recover and you have to think about it so much.
Well, I think the smooth sailing is in that it doesn't really negatively impact you.
Mm-hmm.
You think about it and it may give you a little bit of a tweak, in terms of, but then you can get past it so easily.
Right, exactly. What about the sort of daily triggers that we all face, like the diet culture and all the crazy talk there is now about nutrition and quote unquote wellness, like the sort of wacky things that people are doing in the name of wellness. Like when those come up for in your feed and in your life and whatever, do you have any ways that you sort of push back against those or frame it to yourself in order to not be triggered or pulled back in?
I can say that I really don't get triggered anymore. But I will say that being a dietitian now for 35 or more years, being in the nutrition field, I have seen some radical shifts in what we think about really constitutes good nutrition. So I actually look at things. I try to keep my mind kind of open and look at what people are saying and think, is there any real good scientific foundation for this, basis for this thinking? Now, rarely there is when you're looking at the extreme crazy sorts of things. But that's sort of where my thought processes go, is to look at something. And then, when I look at it and go, nah, I don't think so. It's just more crazy stuff. I just ignore it. I like to know what's going on because of, talking with people who are really wondering. They don't have the ability to really distinguish fact from fiction themselves. I also like to experiment, So some things that you could say, oh, that's so extreme, kale smoothies and things like that. Well, I'd like to try them and see what they're like, And I can say that they're not going to be any, major part of my eating routine for the rest of the night. But sometimes I kind of like one,
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
They taste good.
But it's interesting, when I talk about the shifts in nutrition, I don't know whether it's just my rogue mind, but I always pushed back against some of the dictates from, about nutrition. For example, when everybody was saying not to eat butter, I was telling people, eat butter.
Yeah.
And we never served fake foods at Green Mountain. We always served, real sugar, real, full fat dressings, those sorts of things, because we just kind of knew. And it's sort of, I don't even know what to attribute it to, but there is just this kind of gut understanding sometimes of really what is good for you,
That's cool. It sounds like maybe intuition or something.
Yeah. And maybe experiencing it too. I mean, I always looked at it and going, well, does that really taste good to you? We've always served like ice cream at Green Mountain and pizza and things like that. And we never made, low fat, low sugar ice cream. It's like, who wants to eat it? And we're trying to model for you a way of eating that you're going to want to do.
Totally. Yeah. A real life way of eating and not something that you can only sustain at a camp where there's all these diet products.
Right.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. And that's really been our whole approach at Green Mountain since its inception, was to really try to help women put in place an approach they can manage at home. That it's not you're just going to run off to a spa or something and eat really healthy and, lose a few pounds and then go home and, okay, what do I do now?
Right.
But one that's really going to support your health long term.
Yeah. That's great. I love that. And so in terms of the marketing, I'm curious because we talked a little bit before about like our offline about how, Google searches make it sort of inevitable that people are going to search for weight loss. And, when someone is in that mindset of like wanting weight loss, but maybe wanting to not be so crazy around food or whatever it is, like how do you sort of capture that client in that moment when they're searching for something? And, so it's like been the case for you guys that you had to have some sort of weight loss, like those words somewhere in the page or, whatever to be able to like market the service, right, which I think is so unfortunately true of so many people. It's very hard to do marketing on a large scale without having some like weight lossy buzzwords in there. But how do you sort of navigate that with the health at every size philosophy?
Well, you're right. It is all about ranking in those search engines. And if you don't rank in them, you can be pretty lost unless you have some other sources of referrals, which we're trying to build within the professional community, that we have more people referring to us so we're not so dependent on the internet. But we did just launch a new website in February, and we just went through exactly what we knew we were going to go through. We dropped out of the search engines. And it always happens when you launch a new site, because I don't know what the mechanics are of that, but it takes a while for you to get your rankings back. But what we had done this time was really make an effort to nuance the language around weight loss so that we would stay in the search engines, but we were still being true to, our philosophy. For example, on our homepage, you'll see the headline is our liberating philosophy about weight loss. That's sort of the main. And then the next subhead is surprise. It's not about weight loss.
Yeah.
And then it says it's about gaining health. And so, so we're talking to search engines, but we're also talking to people who don't get it. That are very much still in that weight loss mode. So the women who come to Green Mountain, most of them have never heard of health at every size. A lot of them haven't heard of mindful eating or intuitive eating. They just know things don't work for them, and they're really at the point where they want to try something different. And that's what we have seen, which has been tremendous with this new website, is that the time on page is really increased. People are engaged when they're there, so they really like what we're saying.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's more like a sort of bringing them along or introducing people to these philosophies rather than expecting them to, because I think for someone to be ready, understand enough to Google like health at every size retreat or intuitive eating retreat or something like that would be a different sort of stage, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, I don't know how big a market there is out there for that. I think people are probably working more with individual practitioners, and then once they get this philosophy, they're not going to spend their vacations going to a retreat on that. They're going to go to Cancun or something.
Right.
I don't know. There's probably a good market, but I don't know if there is one enough to sustain a place like Green Mountain year round. We've got a really very qualified professional staff, psychologists, registered dietitians, exercise physiologists. I mean, it's a powerful staff. So we need to have a good census year round to keep it going.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And you guys have a binge eating program now too, right?
We do. We opened last fall the Women's Center for Binge and Emotional Eating, and it is an outpatient clinic.
Oh, that's awesome. So like, is there an IOP program or?
Well, we can in Vermont. They didn't allow us to an IOP program, but it's called Pathway, and it's a program that's, just one step under an IOP. in terms of staying within the regulations, and it's really powerful. So, and then when you combine it with the stay at Green Mountain is more psychoeducational, where you're getting an introduction to the theories and the concepts, and then being able to practice them, actually practice them. Whereas the Women's Center is doing actual therapy. So the combination is really very powerful.
That's cool. So you could do both. You could do a stay at Green Mountain with the Women's Center.
Right.
That's awesome. How long do people usually stay?
The average stay is 2 weeks. We actually have a 4-week program, but you can week at a time. So many people will come and do a couple of weeks and then come back to finish it at a later time. Some people can only get a week or so away, and so they'll come for a week, and they can get a lot out of that too, because it is a very foundational program that's designed to get them started.
Nice. Oh, that's so awesome. Well, we're running out of time, but if you want to let people know where they can find you and your program online, that would be great.
Well, we are Green Mountain at foxrun.com. Mm-hmm. We're in Vermont. Uh-huh. It's absolutely gorgeous right now. It's gorgeous all year round, but we do have the 4 seasons.
Yeah, and beautiful in the fall, totally.
Yeah, absolutely. But we're coming finally into summer here, and it's a gorgeous day outside. So I'm going to escape out there after I talk to you.
Nice. Yay. Well, I'm going to hopefully escape outside too, although Brooklyn is not as lovely as it is up there. I'm like counting down the days until my vacation next week, though. So I'm very excited.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for talking with us, Marsha. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. I love it. Thank you.
So that's our show. Thanks again so much to our guest for being here, and thanks to you guys for listening. You can find us online at christyharrison.com/foodpsych. Follow us on Twitter at foodpsychpod, and like us on Facebook. We're at facebook.com/foodpsych. We'll be back again soon with another main episode, and you can get our bonus episodes on our Patreon page. Just go to patreon.com/foodpsych. That's patreon.com/foodpsych, and sign up at the premium levels to get our Ask Food Psych bonus episodes. The music you're hearing behind me now is by a band called AWOL, and the track is called Food, used under the Creative Commons license. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, stay psyched.
Stupid or scared, no work in the kitchen now. Who put